Rockets and Knicks were in Game 5 when O.J. started that fateful drive. His four-way hazard lights were blinking, and no one knew what the juice was thinking.
I've been to Reno, Chicago, Fargo, Minnesota, Buffalo, Toronto, Winslow, Sarasota, Wichita, Tulsa, Ottawa, Oklahoma, Tampa, Panama, Mattawa, La Paloma, Bangor, Baltimore, Salvador, Amarillo, Tocopilla, Barranquilla, and Padilla. I'm a killer. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Crossed the desert bare, man. I breathe the mountain air, man. I've traveled, I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere.
This is Oversight Live, your advocate for good governance. We're putting the site back in. Oversight. Here's the watcher on the wall, your host, Ben Carpenter.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Oversight Live. This is Monday evening, and I am Ben Carpenter, your host. What is Oversight Live? Well, Oversight Live is your opportunity to get informed about what's going on down in Juneau in a way that helps you understand. So I'm going to, and I have been, bringing to you committee meetings and floor sessions and other things like press conferences that are important for you to understand. And this is a forum for us to discuss and ask questions and understand what's actually happening so that we can provide better oversight of our government. I served 6 years in the legislature here in Alaska, and I want to impart my knowledge to you so that you can make better decisions at the ballot box and understand what's going on. If you've got questions about what we're viewing, or if you've just got questions in general about what's happening down in Juneau, you can chat them in your window here. We're broadcasting on YouTube, X, and Facebook, and if you chat your question, I'll be able to receive it live and attempt to answer your question live. If you're watching this recording, then you can email me questions at producer@oversightlive.com, and I'll do my best to answer your questions on another episode, or maybe I'll respond to you in email if it's a quick question. If it's a really good question, I'm going to use it on air here because, you know, if you've got the question, then somebody else has got the question. So we will do our best to edify everyone with good questions and hopefully good answers. If I can't get you an immediate answer, then I'm going to do my best to research it and find an answer for you. We know that getting down to Juneau is tough for Alaskans. You can't get there by road. We can only take planes and ferries to get there. And so consider this your road to Juneau until we can build a real one. All right. So we're going to dive in tonight. Thanks for grabbing the flagpole. I'm not exactly sure what you're talking about here. Thanks for grabbing the flagpole. As I said, the pledge as well. Appreciate that. Not entirely sure what you were. Oh, now I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes. We met this weekend. We had a political party convention, a Republican Party convention. And this individual was using the American flag as it was modifying it and it began to tip over. So I grabbed the flag pole to keep it from tipping over. Anyway, now I understand what you're saying. Had to figure out what the context was. All right. So what's going on in the legislature right now? Well, things are heating up bill-wise. And when I say heating up, I mean time-wise. So under normal rules, and I'm gonna show you here where this comes from, so it'll make more sense. Let's make it bigger here so you can see what's going on. Okay, so what you're looking at is a copy of the uniform rules. So this is how the legislature does its business. It's how the rules that both the Senate and the House are supposed to follow. And with regard to meetings, the rules state that the time and place, subject matter of all meetings shall be provided by the chair to the chief clerk no later than 4 p.m. on Thursday, the preceding week of the meeting. There's a 5-day notice here. So notice of the time and place of the first public hearing on the meeting and resolution at least 5 days before the hearing. Okay. So this is what is normal operating timelines in the legislature is 5 days. So you give the notice on Thursday for the preceding week for what's happening the next week. And there's a 5-day window before you have bill hearings. Okay. So that's the public has an awareness of what's going on. Okay. So that's rule 23. You, the public, under normal circumstances, under these rules, get 5 days notice before there's a bill hearing so that you can plan and attend and pay attention. Okay. And then that's all viewable on the website, akleg.gov, akleg.gov. So all of the information that you find regarding a particular bill or a particular committee is all 5 days in advance of a meeting. But if you scroll down here to D, provision D, it says the provisions of A and B do not apply to a standing special joint committee meeting scheduled after the date of a conference committee has been chosen to consider amendments to or differences between versions of the General Appropriations Act. However, your chairs have to give the time and place and subject matter notice at least 24 hours before the meeting. Okay, so this is what's happening in the legislature right now and what we're going to witness here tonight. What's happening is the 24-hour, what they call the 24-hour rule is now in effect because the conference committee was put forward. And I always get questions about conference committee. What does that actually mean? So we're going to look at it just a little bit tonight and see what's going on. The issue at hand here for the appropriations bill is that the Senate passed one version and the House passed another version, and they're not identical. So which one goes to the governor? Well, they have to figure it out. So both the House and the Senate were asked to concur with the changes made by the other body, and both of them said no. And so you have to have this conference committee, and that's where this is happening. So conference committee is one part of the legislative business that's happening. But because of this rule, that means that all of the other bills that are not the appropriations bill now fall under this 24-hour rule. So the public will only be notified 24 hours in advance of any particular bill hearing. And it's not just the public, it's also the legislators. So if you're following a bunch of bills as a legislator and you want to be able to influence and attend a committee or it's your own committee and you're having to be prepared for it, the bills start moving very quickly because there's not a 5-day waiting period and people can have time to get ready. Okay. So the bills start moving very quickly. So that's what you're going to see happening and what you are seeing happening right now with regard to all of the other bills in the legislature. They start moving very quickly. You will also find that committees will start combining bills or combining sections of bills in order to get them passed and through. And anyway, so now we're in the 24-hour window. Bills are moving quickly. All right. And some, I would say some bills that the majorities are prioritizing will be moving quickly. Okay, let's take a look here. I'm going to scroll down real quick here, see if I can find it without making everybody seasick. Looking for the pre-file action on bills. All right, we're getting close. Some bills. Conference committee. Okay, so here's what happens with a conference committee. This is important that you understand because what comes out of the conference committee can be significantly different in some cases from what went into the conference committee. And the conference committee is, as we saw previous, was only 6 people. Okay, and we'll witness it tonight. You get 2 members of the majority in the House and 2 members of the majority in the Senate. And then you get 1 minority member from the House and 1 minority member from the Senate. So out of the 6, you get 2 minority members. So they're basically there to object, but they've got no way to really pool their votes and affect change, right? So as we'll see, as we watch a conference committee happen, and tonight there's not a whole lot of action going on, but something significant. You'll see that it is obvious that things have been discussed beforehand, and they're just reading from a list of agreements, and there's not really any significant discussion or change happening during the conference meeting. All of the work happens behind the scenes. Okay, but here's the important thing. Couple of important things. Okay. Okay, so if one house refuses to concur in the amendments of the other, then that sets up this conference committee process. And it's not just for an appropriations bill, it's for any bill. If you've got 2 different, a House version and a Senate version of a regular non-appropriations bill, it can also go through our conference committee. Okay. If the House and Senate refuse to recede, the presiding officers of each House appoint 3 members to sit as a conference committee. The committee meets when mutually agreeable. Okay, if the committee reaches agreements on previously adopted amendments to a bill adopted by their House, the committee then submits an identical report to each House. The House or the Senate cannot make any changes to what comes out of the conference committee. Okay, the report is not subject to amendment in either House. So whatever the conference committee can agree upon initially, it gets set aside, and it will go back to the House and the Senate, and they will have an up or down vote on it. Okay, so no opportunity for amendment. Okay. If the report, and that could be the entire report, and when we're seeing the word report here, it means the bill that's before the committee. Okay, so sorry, it is what the committee produces from the bill that is before the committee. So they produce this report based on the agreement that the committee comes up with, and that could solve the entire bill. Okay, so they could agree to everything they need to agree to right then, produce the report, send it back to the House and the Senate, and then they have an up or down vote on it. Right here says, if the report is adopted by each House, the bill is enrolled, signed, and transmitted to the governor. Okay, so that could be the end of it, and that could be a very easy conference committee. If the members of the conference committee cannot agree on amendments, or basically if they can't agree on the changes to each of the versions of the bill, then the conference committee submits an identical written report to each House listing the specific points of disagreement for which the committee requests powers of free conference. Okay, so now the committee can offer or can ask for limited powers of free conference. And if that doesn't work to produce an agreement, then they can ask for powers of free conference, not limited free conference, but free conference. So you've got a conference committee, with limited free powers, and then you've got free powers. Okay. Now here's the kicker, because people don't realize that this is what happens. The presiding officer of each House may then give limited powers of free conference. That's the first step on the specific points listed. Okay, so this is everything that they couldn't agree on. If the members of a conference committee with limited powers of free conference cannot agree on amendments, one or both houses refuse to adopt the committee report, it is then in order to appoint a free conference committee. A member who served on a conference committee or a conference committee with limited powers of free conference may not be appointed to subsequent conference committee or free conference committee concerning the same measure. Okay, so in the meeting that we're going to see here, there's 6 members, and if they request limited powers of free conference and they can't find an agreement, and it moves to a conference committee with a free conference committee powers. Free conference committee. Okay. If it moves to that, then those 6 people are no longer eligible to sit on that committee. They can no longer serve. So now the presiding officer has to appoint presiding officers. So both your House and your Senate have to appoint 3 new members to the conference committee to take it forward in the free conference committee. So if you've got a really contentious issue that the members of the conference committee initially cannot find any agreement to, there is a path to replace all 3 members in the conference committee and put 3 different members on in this free conference committee. So that is what's happening right now with the appropriations budget in the legislature. Both houses are now meeting to discuss changes that they want to see. Okay. So quickly, we're going to jump over to that committee meeting. Sorry, clicking and talking at the same time. Okay. There we go. And there it is. Okay. So they've already established their quorum. They've already there's 6 people there. They've got everyone they need. They've already introduced themselves, and now we're going to jump into the context of what's happening within the meeting.
Earlier, to order as chair of the conference committee, I would like to review the process we will follow for these meetings. First, both House and Senate budget processes followed for public testimony. That portion of the process is now concluded. The conference committee.
My apology on the volume if you can't hear that. The mic needs to be closer to his mouth. I cannot increase the volume anymore. I've got it up as high as I can without making it not sound good.
We will not be accepting public testimony unless invited by the chair. Only members of the conference committee may take part in the discussion or sit at this table. Third, the legislative finance has been directed to prepare the motion sheets we will be using at the table. These sheets summarize the differences between the 2 versions of the bills that are the business of this conference committee. The motion sheets in suspense. The motion sheets be posted by Legislative Finance Division website and will be updated after each meeting. The conference committee will operate under Uniform Rule 42, adopting any motion or taking any action requires a majority vote of each body.
All right. Anybody can come in here and do this job. If you can make a decision, you can come in and do this job, right? Staff has laid out the document and all you have to do is read it.
A copy of Uniform Rule 42 and related legal opinions are in each member's packet.
Brief it is.
Okay, so let's fast forward here to a pertinent part. I don't need the music. Let's go to right here.
Now we'll go to the adoption of identical items. At this point, I would like to obtain a motion to adopt all identical items. Representative Josephson.
Chair Hoffman, I move that all appropriations in language that are identical in both the House and Senate versions of House Bill 263 and House Bill 265 be adopted.
Is there objection? Seeing no objection, those identical items are adopted.
Okay, so the committee didn't have to do anything. The staff didn't really have to do anything. All it is logically saying is, hey, if there's provisions in both bills, the Senate version and the House version, and they're identical, then we agree. We can set those aside and we don't have to talk about them. We don't have to discuss them. They're approved and they'll go out in the report as the recommendation from the committee. Now we can focus on the things that we don't agree with.
I would entertain a motion to request limited powers for budget items for which differences exist. I have distributed 2 identical letters for this purpose dated May 11th, 2026. One is addressed to the Speaker of the House and one is addressed to the Senate President. Under limited powers, the conference committee may adopt any amount between 0 and the high number of either the House or the Senate version of each item subject to the conference.
Okay, so here is a key difference between the 2 requests that the conference committee can make. Okay, so Senator Hoffman just said, I'm going to send a letter to both presiding officers asking for limited powers of conference because we didn't agree on everything. We did set aside what we agreed upon, and now we've got a list of things that we don't agree upon. We need limited powers. Okay, so now this means that they get to pick with regards to the appropriation bill, they get to pick a number in between 0 to the maximum in either of the bill to find agreement. So for example, if it's a $1 million appropriation to X, Y, and Z, we can pick 0, we can pick $1 million, or we can pick any number in between to find agreement on that appropriation. Okay. What they can't do is amend the bill. They can't make something up. They can't make a different amendment up. They can only pick what's between the 2 bills. Okay. If they can't find agreement in the limited powers, then they have to go to free conference and then they can offer amendments. And those amendments could change the bill substantially. Okay. But these cats, these particular legislators will never be able to go through that process. So they can't use it strategically to their own advantage to disagree about a particular thing and not find agreement, because they themselves will not be able to be the person that offers the amendment going forward. They will be removed from their position and a new set of legislators will move into a free conference committee. We're not there yet. What we're witnessing is a request for limited powers. And then that's all that happens at this meeting is a request. So this meeting is just a formality to find the agreement and find the disagreement and then request limited powers. And that's all that happens in this meeting. Now, the next legislative session, floor session, when the speaker, and actually I don't think it has to wait for a session. The letter goes to the presiding officers. They agree and appoint, and then it goes back to the conference committee, and then they can hold another meeting with approved limited powers of conference. So that's what has happened with regard to the budget bill, appropriations bill. So that's operating budget and mental health budget. Okay. Miguel wants to know what everybody's on everybody's mind. Did the gas bill leave Senate resources and go to finance yet? Senate finance. The answer is no. It has not. And the good news is we've got the opportunity to watch and see what has happened with that. I've fast forwarded the meeting just a little bit to get us to a point where they start talking about the pertinent stuff here, and then we can step right in. Now, what they've done is given Department of Revenue an opportunity to read their version H of the bill, and Dan Stickle's going to be here to communicate to the committee how Department of Revenue is interpreting and would execute this bill. What would this bill do? So the committee members are now going to listen to the executive branch to find out how their provisions in the bill are actually going to be implemented and what it means for the state. And they have opportunities to ask questions. So Dan's going to present, and then there's going to be questions. So that's the answer to your question. No, we don't have movement yet out of the Senate Finance. Now, House Resources already passed their bill on to House Finance. Senate Resources is dragging their feet a little bit longer. Okay. Yeah, why doesn't that surprise any of us? Okay, let's go with this real quick here.
All right. So back to our main subject today, and that was the Department of Revenue, who will be presenting an updated fiscal note and some analysis of version H of SB 280. So with that, I will invite Mr. Dan Stickle to the table, the chief economist who will guide us through this. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Dan Stickle, Chief Economist with Department of Revenue.
And never forget, when you hear the department showing up to give their perspective on the bill, this is one constitutionally empowered part of our government, the executive branch, coming over to communicate to a separate, the legislative branch, and providing advice on what the legislative branch wants to do. Okay. It is different than if the legislature pays for a consultant to come in and tell them what their bill is going to do. Okay. That is a legislative decision to spend money to pay somebody to give them third-party objective opinions, because you might not have a friendly department or a Department of Revenue. You might not have a Department of Revenue leadership or governor or political apparatus that wants to play ball with your bill. There may be broken relationships, and you just can't trust the information that's coming from the Department of Revenue, for example. Okay, there are times when when people don't want to trust the other branch. That's why the legislature would have an opportunity to bring in their own subject matter expert. I mean, if they don't get the right answer from Dan, or they don't believe Dan or the executive branch has the right opinion, then you can go find your own expert that tells you something completely different, right? So I appreciate Dan Stickle being here, because Dan Stickle's, he knows his stuff. And I have great confidence when I'm talking to Dan, and I think all legislators pretty much, I've never heard anybody say anything bad about Dan. He knows his stuff and presents well, answers questions when he knows the answer, and then says, I'll have to get back to you when he doesn't know. He doesn't make stuff up. So that's what we're going to hear is the executive branch telling the legislative branch what they're about to do with their bill from the department's perspective.
So we have a pretty robust slide deck, but it's a lot of the same material that we've presented in the past, just updated for the most recent committee substitute.
Good question, Rick. Rick asks, isn't the executive branch supposed to stay in their own corner? You don't have the experience in the legislature to know, to really know what the provisions you're going to put in the bill. If it's a complex tax bill, the legislators don't know. They don't know what the implications are going to be. They don't manage the taxes. They don't know all of the statutes. They don't know all of the regulations. They don't know the intricacies. They don't know. They have no idea. And I'm not exaggerating. It's not a partisan thing. They just don't know. So when the executive branch comes in and tells the legislature how it's going to interpret, and that's really what it is the chief economist is going to interpret what he thinks the language in the bill is going to do, right? If you pass this today, this is what I'm going to have to do in the Department of Revenue. This is how I'm going to approach it. And this is what I think is going to happen, right? So he's giving that opinion. If he doesn't, the legislature's got to find somebody else to tell them, because they don't know. The chair, they don't know. They don't know. They're passing laws. with the intent of reaching some sort of policy objective, but they don't know whether what they're writing and the provisions that they put in the bill are actually going to do what they are wanting it to do. That's why they ask for others to come in and tell them whether it's this, they've got the right thing or not. So, no, in this case, the executive branch can't sit in its own corner and color. It needs to be part of the process. Otherwise, you get really bad bills. Do you always trust 100% what the executive branch is going to say, what their opinion is? No, that's why you've got your own consultants or subject matter experts. If you're lucky enough to have one of those legislators or staff members that are that have experience in the area.
Very good.
So again, slide 2 is our list of acronyms and definition. Slide 3. So once again, we'll work through the proposed.
Before we get, Lisa's asking a question that came to me late here before I jumped over to the Senate Resources Committee. Lisa, you're asking a question. When will people know what the issues are for the Limited Powers Conference Committee? It's a really good question. I don't remember whether the agreed upon or the disagreed upon provisions in the bill. I know that they get put out in a spreadsheet, and then they're going to go through them behind closed doors. They're going to go through them and try to figure out, do I want $0 or $1 million on this, right? As I talked about earlier. So they're going to have a list of these items. I don't remember whether that list of that items is put out on Basis or on the website for the public to see what is disagreed upon. But at the end of the process, there will be a bill with the changes in them. So to be completely honest, I don't remember, and I'm not sure whether you actually get a preview of that in the public. As a legislator, I'm thinking back in the multiple conference committees that I've witnessed happen. I've never sat on one, but I think I remember seeing the spreadsheet that they were going to be going over. Matter of fact, I'm sure that I did. So it is knowable, at least from the rest of the legislature's perspective. It's not secret in that regard, but I'm not sure whether it's published to the general public. And we could do a search real quick. Let's just pull up the website here and see if special committees, and I'll see if we can find it is not there. Let me see. There it is. Okay. Okay, that's referrals. There's the bill sponsored. Yeah, I do not see, I've got the meetings, I've got the referrals, but I do not have any documents associated with that conference committee. So I think the answer is no at this point. It's not those documents aren't available to the public. I'm not sure that they aren't a secret document. I just think that the sausage is going to be made so quickly that there wouldn't be a benefit to the public to see it, and there's no public testimony. So why would it matter at that point? Whatever they're going to do in the conference committee is whatever they're going to do. It's not like you can comment on it. It might be nice to know, and you might be able to hold people accountable for what they did or didn't do in conference committee. But with regard to influencing the outcome, the public has very, very little opportunity to influence the outcome of the conference committee, because they're not taking public testimony, and it's going to happen very quickly. This isn't something that drags out for days. Let me take that back. It could drag out for days, but it usually does not drag out for days. They usually get this done fairly quickly. Craig is kind of making a joke here. Yeah, if they were perfectly spit, the only problem with that, Craig, is that the legislature is required to pass a budget. So at some point in time, you have to come together and have a yes. You have to find agreement on what to spend on the budget. So you're not going to go home until that happens, whether it's at day 1 or day 120. If you get it done by day 90, then that's great. You just followed the statute. And we did that once. The year was 2020. There we were, expecting to die in the legislature because we're going to get COVID. And the presiding feeling was we've got to get out of here as quickly as possible. So we passed a budget in less than 90 days and we were done. So with regard to passing a budget, all it takes is the proper motivation and the legislature can get it done. Okay, let's jump into what is going on with this Senate Resources Bill.
Legislation and the revenue impacts of the current CS before the committee. We'll discuss our updated estimates of implementation costs and then walk through the detailed project modeling. So once again, on slide 5, the disclaimer, we're dealing with some very complex topics here. We have one of the most complex oil and gas systems in the world, and all of the analysis here is our preliminary interpretation of our understanding of the bill provisions and how those relate to our spring revenue forecast. And as I'll talk about later on, there's some provisions that will need to be addressed through regulations as we go through the implementation process. So once again, on slide 6, 3 broad categories of changes in the bill. The increased oversight and disclosure requirements for AGDC, as well as related support from Department of Revenue in commercial analysis for AGDC in the legislature, in particular on equity investment decisions. Firmer language around prevailing value and receiving fair value for oil and gas. And then changes to taxes related to gas and LNG. So slide 7 lays out the specific impacts of this version of the bill on Department of Revenue, and then we'll walk through each of these in turn.
Okay, so I just give you just a brief second here to look and see what the big picture is as to what the big topics are that this bill does. So we're talking about a property tax exemption and establishing a volumetric tax. There's a community impact fee. There's infrastructure maintenance surcharge. There's a pass-through entity tax. Okay, so that's a property tax exemption plus a volumetric tax is what the governor asked for. And now the legislature is going to add a bunch of other taxes and fees: community impact fee, infrastructure maintenance surcharge, pass-through entity, and then I think the oil and gas taxes. Maybe that's the infrastructure maintenance surcharge. That's the 30 cents charge, and then a requirement to assist with state investment decisions. Okay, so some pretty big, complex issues for a bill that's supposed to be helping move a complex project forward. Adding complexity usually does not help make things happen. Adding complexity usually helps slow things down or prevent things from happening.
Slide 8, note on the revenue impacts. Once again, it's an indeterminate fiscal note, so we can't say with certainty whether the gas project will receive a final investment decision and proceed with or without this bill. And so when we do our fiscal analysis in the fiscal note itself, it's an indeterminate fiscal note, and we provide kind of a range of estimates in there. And then when we're doing the detailed analysis in the presentation, we're working on if the project were to proceed under each of these different tax regimes, what would the impacts be there? So starting with the provisions of this bill. So it would exempt the AKLNG project from state and local property taxes, and that there would be a time frame around that, where if the project does not begin construction by 2028 and does not commence operations by 2032, those exemptions would repeal and revert to current law. We do not, once again, we do not include the gas line in our official revenue forecast. So this would be revenue above and beyond the official revenue forecast, and we do mention what those numbers would be. 24 million initially in 2029, ramping up to $244 million in 2033. Those would be the current law property tax revenues just to the state if the project were to proceed without a tax change. Slide 10 talks about the levy of the alternative volumetric tax. So this would be in lieu of the property tax, and it would begin with the start of commercial operations for each component of the project. So there wouldn't be any volume threshold or ramp up period, and the volumetric tax would be 15 cents per 1,000 cubic feet for the treatment plant, 15 cents per 1,000 cubic feet for the pipeline, and then 25 cents per 1,000 cubic feet for the LNG export facility. And then after a decade of operations, those rates would be adjusted by inflation.
Go ahead and finish the slide before we take questions.
Sure, yeah. And then the final bullet point here just talks about where that revenue would go. So the state would share about 81% of that revenue with municipalities. Half of the revenue would be distributed on a per capita basis to communities across the state, and then the other half of the revenue would be distributed to communities that the pipeline runs through directly, with the state retaining the portion of that revenue, the portion of that 50% for the unorganized borough portion of the line.
Very good. Questions on this slide? Senator Wilkowski.
Thank you. Out of the 8 operating and 20 FERC-approved LNG export facilities in the United States, how many are taxed on a volumetric basis?
Senator Wilkowski, through the chair, I don't know the answer to that question.
Follow up.
For purposes of this bill, how are fugitive emissions, leaks, fuels, and flaring treated in a volumetric property tax scenario?
Senator Wilkowski, through the chair, I don't know the answer to that question. I'd be happy to follow up in writing.
Follow up.
The inflation rate is expected to be greater than 2%, and I'm just curious what the governor's rationale was in choosing such a low inflationary rate, and what's the rationale for the state and municipalities accepting the steady and compounding decline in real purchasing power of tax revenues?
Senator Wilkowski, through the chair, I can't speak to the rationale of the 1%. That might be something that AGDC folks will have some insight into, potentially.
Follow up. Any other questions on slide 10? Seeing none, I'll let you proceed.
All right, moving on to slide 11, provides some estimates for the revenue from the alternative volumetric tax.
Rick asks a good question. Is Senator Wilkowski asking questions he knows this guy does not have an answer? Senator Wilkowski is asking questions sometimes because he wants an answer and sometimes because he wants to make a point. The last question with regard to the 1% and the inflation proofing is because he disagrees with the governor over what the rate of increase should be after the 10 years. So if you only increase the tax, the volumetric tax 1% each year, but inflation is 2%, then over time your tax growth is not keeping up with inflation. And so you have less money every year, not because you didn't collect enough taxes, it's because inflation is eating away your purchasing power of the money you did collect. So by keeping up with inflation, the argument is we take more and more in taxes every year, but the value of money is changing with inflation. And so it's staying the same. It looks like it's more, but with regard to the purchasing power, it's staying the same. Why would the governor choose 1% instead of whatever the inflation for that given year was? Well, maybe you want to wean the government off of money. Like, do we really need to take that money out of the private sector? Do we really need to keep up with inflation? I mean, you could always come back and change the rate later and add more tax later if you need to, but putting an automatic increase in there with inflation just means that you're going to make sure that that tax goes up and make sure that you continue to have the same amount of money for government regarding in regards to your purchasing power, as you know. It holds the government harmless to the decisions that the voters make or that Washington, D.C. makes with regard to fiscal policy. We just continue to go and take more out of the private sector when our national fiscal policy causes inflation to go up. So what do we care? What does the government and the government workers and the government lobby and all of that care whether inflation goes up? How does inflation goes up? How does it go up? It goes up when the federal government prints more money. So what do we care if all we're going to do when inflation goes up is take more from the private sector, take more out of the tax? It just holds us harmless, right? So policies from the people that are pro-government spending, policies that allow the federal government to go into debt. That's what would be happening with printing of money. You're going into debt. When you cause inflation to rise, it is a hidden tax on everybody because the value of your dollar dropped, and what you had in savings or what you earned in your job is worth less when you go to purchase something with it. Okay, so it's a hidden tax. The government here gets held harmless because it's going to continue to take money out of the private sector through this volumetric tax at a higher rate according to the rate of inflation. That doesn't happen to you unless your boss gives you a raise every time inflation goes up. This is taking care of government and making sure that government gets its due regardless of whatever policy happens in the at the federal level. This is probably not the time I need to get into it, but this is also why there's a conversation about tying education spending to inflation. Make sure that every year education funding goes up to at least the level of inflation, so that our purchasing power, our government purchasing power, right? We've got to be able to do government, and so we need to keep up with inflation. Let alone, maybe you shouldn't have the policies that are putting inflation in play, right? Maybe we shouldn't be printing money that causes inflation or causes a massive growth in inflation. So for some information, Senator Wielkowski brought forward some information that he had that says we're expecting greater than 2% inflation moving forward. I don't know I haven't seen a recent projection on what we're expected through the rest of the Trump administration on inflation. I know it has come down from a high peak that it was at just after the COVID years, and through the Build Back Better bill and all of the federal spending that's been happening. I mean, a quarter of all that spending is debt. It's printing of money to pay for the demands of spending of Americans, right? So boiling it down to how that matters here, it's just to say that through your pipeline, the volumetric tax as fiscal policy, federal fiscal policy, creates inflation, there will be more money taken out of the tax system here that we're setting up to match that inflation and keep a parity with the purchasing power of the dollar. No, that's what we can't do, Miguel. Can't we leave the private sector to do what it needs for us? No, I mean, honestly, no. And this is not popular, but somebody has to pay for government. Alaska is the only state that says, well, we don't have to have some sort of taxation. We'll just spend we'll spend the earnings off of our investments. Okay. No, you don't have to have a tax. You could leave government alone, but we don't because government always wants to grow. I'm sorry. We could leave the private sector alone, but we don't. We could, but we won't. Especially in Alaska. We want more and more. So whether you're taking it from the federal government, which is debt and federal taxes, or you're taking it from the permanent fund earnings, which is taking from your dividend, right? If you were paying a statutory dividend, then it wouldn't be taking from your dividend. It'd just be the government's statutory portion of the permanent fund earnings. But because it's not, you're going to be paying with your dividend. Okay. So it doesn't matter. Government's got to get its money somehow. It's not it's the spending. Spending is taxation. Okay. Someone is going to pay. Just matters who it's going to be. How is the fairness quotient determined here? Is it industry that's going to pay it? Is it rich people that are going to pay it? Is it everyone that has to pay? Every jurisdiction, every state, every country has to figure that out. Okay, let's move forward.
Acts under the bill as before the committee. So if the project proceeds, this would be an increase in revenue, a little under $10 million in 2029 with first production. That would be just production for in-state consumption, and then ramping up to $620 million of tax revenue once full export operations are ongoing in 2033. And as I mentioned earlier, 81% of that gets shared to municipalities. And so we show the unrestricted general fund portion to the state would be $1.85 million, ramping up to $255 million in 2033, with the remainder of that being distributed to the municipalities.
There really needs to be a bullet between the first bullet and the second bullet. And it needs to say something really simple. If the project doesn't proceed, no increase to revenue is estimated initially by 2029 and will never ramp up. Because you can think that you're making a decision that's going to benefit the state, but you're likely to just kind of overlook the if then. If the project proceeds, then we see an increase. We don't want to see that if then. We just want to see, oh, we're going to see estimated increases. Good. Let's do that.
Question, Senator Wielechowski.
In your model, how much of the production tax and royalty revenue derives from increased liquids production versus gas production?
Senator Wielechowski through the chair. So the answer to that is it's a nuanced answer. And the reason for that is that we have a combined severance tax. That there's interactions between the oil and gas components of that. In general, the majority of the incremental revenue is from the gas production tax. And we could provide a detailed breakout of the oil versus gas over the life of the project, again, with that nuance that there is interactions between the two.
Follow up.
And can you break out separately the 45Q revenues that accrue to the gas treatment plant? And also, if the state takes gas in kind, would it be eligible for revenues associated with its share of the CO2?
Senator Wielechowski through the chair, yes, we can break out our assumptions around the 45Q tax credits, and we can provide...
That's a fairness question that Senator Wielechowski's trying to get at, right? Is the company going to benefit through 45Q tax credits and that would be unfair. So we can agree to tax them more because they're going to benefit with these tax credits.
Some further clarification on how that relates to gas in kind.
Other questions on slide 11? Seeing none. We can go on to slide 12.
All right, slide 12. So slide 12, this version of the bill has a community impact fee. In version H, the community impact fee would be the $1 million for each mile of gas pipeline installed during the previous calendar year. As I mentioned in a previous presentation, there is some uncertainty around exactly how that definition of installed would work and how the application of the fee would work in the year in which the pipeline construction is completed and gas begins to flow.
This is a great way. We talk about incentives matter. Incentives matter in finances, taxes, tax structures in government, right? Incentives matter. What we're doing here is we're incentivizing the state. Sorry, I should say local municipalities, because this is a community impact. So communities, we're incentivizing communities to come up with $807 million of impacts. That's what we're doing here. You establish the metric by which you're going to determine how much money you raise for community impact based on an arbitrary thing like each mile that gets built. So does each mile of the pipeline impact communities equally? Does the first mile versus the last mile? Does the middle mile? When it's underground, does it impact communities as much as when it's above ground? When it goes over a bridge, is there a higher, like, how do you connect the impact to the community to the length of the pipeline? You don't. It's arbitrary. It has nothing to do with the two have nothing to do with each other. So you're just finding some justification for how to come up with a dollar figure that you want to come up with. This isn't the way to address community impacts and support a pipeline. You would want to find something that incentivizes communities to come up with only the impacts that are necessary to be covered. So they have to justify through receipts, they have to justify what the impacts are. Otherwise, they're going to find it. They're going to find the impacts because there's a bunch of money there.
For modeling purposes, we are assuming that about 739 miles or $739 million of community impact fee would be generated based on the phase one portion of the gas pipeline.
Sure.
Senator Myers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Stickle, this is supposed to go out to grants. First comes to state and then goes out as grants. So if not all of the community impact fee is used up in the grants, where would the rest of the money end up?
Senator Myers, through the chair, I'm not positive on the answer to that question. Be happy to respond to that in writing.
I bet you the legislature has an idea where that money could get spent. If the community, imagine this, imagine that the grant application and the reasons for which the grants would be approved. Maybe that's through regulation. Maybe that's through statute. I'm not sure. Maybe it's in this bill. I'm not sure. We're not talking about those specifics. So if it's a grant, I would think that the department's probably going to put forward some regulations as to how you qualify yourself to get into get access to some of the grant money. Okay. But it could be written in statute. It could also be written in statute in a way which makes it very difficult for communities to actually get the money, or limited in scope so that there's just a few things that communities can actually get. Yeah, we passed a grant. It's $800 million. We're giving grants out to communities, but there's very limited opportunity for communities to actually draw from the money. And then the legislature in the end gets to spend the money, right? But we checked the box and said we're going to give community money, and we took care of the big issues. Just made sure that we've got this nice nest egg set aside for legislative use. I mean, I don't put that past the drafters here at all. Like, the intention here is not necessarily to spend $800 million on communities. It is to make sure that you've got some cash to spend with. So totally legitimate question from Senator Meyer's point. What happens when the communities don't have $800 million worth of community impact? Because nobody's asking in this committee, nobody's asking how much impact there actually is. Let's just create $800 million and think that's going to be enough.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on slide 12? All right, seeing none.
All right. Slide 13 is the infrastructure maintenance surcharge. So this is a surcharge of 30 cents per barrel of oil produced anywhere in the state. And it's modeled under our existing hazardous release surcharge, which is levied alongside the oil and gas production tax. Credits and deductions cannot offset this surcharge. And the surcharge would be dedicated towards a pipeline corridor maintenance fund, basically the Dalton Highway and related infrastructure.
State government loves to say this word. It's going to be dedicated.
And we have some revenue estimates for that, expected to range from about $51 to $62 million annually over the time horizon of the fiscal note, and entirely dependent on our oil production forecast. So we're having oil production a little under 500,000 barrels per day presently. We're expecting that to increase to well over 600,000 barrels per day in the early 2030s before declining in the later years. The additional liquids production associated with the AKLNG development would add about $4 million of additional infrastructure maintenance surcharge each year.
Senator Dunbar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for this, Director Stickle. And this is higher than, I think it's a little bit proportionally higher than the estimate in the governor's proposal in 227. And perhaps something has changed since then. But also in SB 227, the fiscal note did not estimate that DOR required any additional staff to.
I don't think the governor was putting a 30-cent tax on, or 30-cent fee. I think it was a 15-cent fee
to administer the surcharge. Is that still the position of the department?
Yeah, Senator Dunbar through the chair. So we are not requesting additional resources for the surcharge aside from one-time programming costs to implement it in our tax system.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Further questions on slide 13?
Yeah.
Senator Rauscher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So bullet number 4 establishes a pipeline corridor maintenance fund in the general fund. However, it doesn't create a dedicated fund. Just can you explain that for us?
Thank you, Senator Rauscher.
The chair. So there's several of these provisions in state statute. So the state constitution prohibits a dedicated fund. Typically the way that this is worked around is there's what's known as a designated fund, where there's language in the budget and statutes that the legislature may appropriate for a specific purpose. We have several of these for various. So for our existing hazardous release surcharge, that may be appropriated for spill and hazardous release prevention and response purposes. We have several other shared taxes. For instance, we share a portion of fisheries taxes back with municipalities. And so it's kind of modeled on that same language where the legislative intent is there, but we're not mandating that dedication or binding the hands of a future legislature.
So the reason so many years ago when the Constitution was formed, the reason that we have a provision in our finance section of the Constitution that prohibits the dedication of funds, meaning every year you cannot force the legislature to spend money on a particular thing. You can't dedicate it. Every year, all of the asks that come to a legislature to spend money on must compete with each other in this process. Okay? The reason that we have that in the Constitution was because the framers of our Constitution knew what would happen if they didn't have something like that, that you would have special interests or reasons, very good reasons, for why government needs to spend a certain amount or a growing amount of money on a particular thing. And it would just get squirreled away and become perpetual. And it wouldn't compete. It wouldn't have to stand scrutiny every year. Okay? That's the reason why we have a prohibition against the dedication of funds. His slide says, the bill says, we're going to dedicate this fund, this tax to this, or this fee, sorry, to the maintenance fund, to road maintenance. Okay. His slide says dedicated. So you can see that the intent that the legislature wants to communicate to the public and to future legislators and just to history is that we want this money to be dedicated to this particular purpose. But in the actual language of the bill, Stickle says, it's going to say designated and may appropriate because they can't actually technically do what they're saying they want to do, but they'll go ahead and do it anyway and use the technical language that they have to do. Okay. This is you and I not knowing any better because we don't hold our legislature accountable for that. We just ask them to spend money and then we don't care where it comes from or how it gets to us. Just spend it. I don't care. It's too hard. Don't educate me on it. Don't tell me how don't tell me how it's done. Just spend the money on it. Make sure it happens every year. I don't want to know. Like whatever excuse it is. All right. The legislature gets away with it and they continue to do it because nobody cares. Nobody cares. And that's how you get government to grow. The legislature does not scrutinize designated funds and designated spending the way they do the spending that comes with general funds that are not designated. If it's designated, it's dedicated. We don't need to talk about that because we've already made a decision that's where we're going to spend money on. Even though the Constitution says we shouldn't do that, we as future generations, I don't even know what that means. It's a designated fund. Okay, well, it means that the legislature said we're going to spend on this, so I guess that's what we're going to spend on. And nobody even thinks about the underlying thing here, that the mechanism or the incentive that's built into a provision that says you can't dedicate things is because you're supposed to have a conversation about it every year. You're supposed to scrutinize it every year. And the very thing that it's supposed to prevent, the legislature has found a way around it by just saying it's designated and everybody just pretends it doesn't exist. That is on us. That is on the legislature. It is on us as voters.
Thank you.
Very good. I don't see any other questions on this slide. So on to 14.
All right, and slide 14 is the pass-through entity tax. So as we've mentioned previously, under current law, only C corporations doing business in the state are subject to corporate income tax.
Okay, so we just saw that this gas bill now includes an oil tax bill, levies a new 30-cent fee tax to barrel of oil traveling down taps, right? So it's has nothing to do with the gas pipeline. And now we have a C Corp provision that has nothing to do with gas pipeline. It's just changing the corporate income tax structure to deal with largely one oil company. I guess
in the
oil and gas
industry, that's about 2/3 of the oil and gas companies doing business in the state. And our modeling assumes that the midstream entity developing the AKLNG project would not be subject to corporate income tax either. And so this provision of the bill would create a pass-through entity tax to tax that all of those remaining oil and gas companies that are not currently subject to corporate tax at beginning at a rate of 5% of taxable income between $1 and $2 million, and then ranging up to 9.4% of taxable income over $5 million, which is the current maximum marginal tax rate for corporate income tax in the state.
Senator Myers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Stickle, I've heard some speculation over the last few weeks that as the developer of the project, Glenfarne is likely going to have to register as a C Corp in order to get access to all the capital markets that they're going to need access to in order to build the project. Do you have any insight on that?
Senator Myers, through the chair, I don't have any specific insight as to their plans. I would defer those to the developer. If they were to transfer into a C Corp, then they would become subject to our oil and gas, well, to our corporate income taxes generally, like any other C Corp.
Follow up, Senator Myers?
Yeah, I wasn't asking you to opine on what their plans are. I know you can't do that, but just looking at the oil and gas market and the size of the project that they're looking at, whether that appears to be more or less likely, I guess.
Senator Myers, through the chair. So that's not really my area of expertise. That might be a good question for the legislative consultants. I know we do have some large oil and gas corporations that are not C corporations, and they are able to invest major sums of money into the state, into major projects. So I can't say with certainty whether that would be a tremendous benefit to them or not to change to a C Corp.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none. Slide 15.
So continuing on the pass-through entity tax, as I've mentioned previously, for the oil and gas pass-through entity tax generally, before the AKLNG project, we've developed a range of up to $100 million per year for that tax type. The high end of that range, the $100 million, is based on taking our existing forecast for corporate income tax for the companies that are subject to that tax and basically scaling that based on expected production. The low end of the range is a reflection of the fact that in any given year, a company may have losses for whatever reason. They could have loss carry forwards. There could be a low price scenario, some major investments. And given the concentration of this pass-through entity tax on a small number of companies, there is a potential that in any given year, the pass-through entity tax could yield close to zero revenue. And over a broad time horizon, we think that the annual revenue would fall within that $0 to $100 million per year range. With the AKLNG project, there would be incremental revenue. And so we're from the incremental production associated with the project for companies that would be subject to the pass-through entity tax on the upstream, as well as the revenue expected on the midstream. And we are assuming about $60 million annually as the incremental revenue in the late 2030s, and then that increases substantially into the 2040s in our modeling.
So slide 15, Senator Dunbar, question?
Yeah, more a comment, Madam Chair. I'll just say very quickly, the way that this slide relates to slides 30 and 31, I sort of don't want the public to get the wrong understanding that $60 million in 2030s, but in the years out, and we'd had this conversation before, in the 2040s and 2050s, we're looking at the hundreds of millions of dollars. And I believe at one point, Mr. Stickle had said $466 million was the number in the incremental change. And so very large numbers after the 2040s. That's all my.
Can you see him licking his chops? Like, man, we're gonna get it good.
Thank you, Senator Dunbar. We'll be getting to those slides, of course, later. Any further questions on slide 15? Seeing none.
All right, slide 16. So utility rate provisions. This is a new slide that we added for this version of the slide deck. So this version prohibits the recovery of cost overruns being passed on to Alaskans' utility rates, and also limits the gas purchase price charged to utilities. So that limit would be $12 per 1,000 cubic feet after pipeline completion and before LNG delivery operations, and then $5 per 1,000 cubic feet after LNG export facility operations begin. And as I presented in a previous hearing, these would represent the maximum charges to utilities for the cost of gas, and you add on a little over $4 to get the final delivered cost to the end consumer. Would note that this 12 and 5 would not be inflation adjusted, so going to the end of our modeled time horizon, it would still be a $12 or $5 per 1,000 cubic feet ceiling.
Let me pause here for just a second and see if I can quickly come up with the, oh man, I forget where I put it. I think it's right here. I have got a slide that I've shown previously. Regarding the cost of gas around the United States. Oh, look at me. I'm trying to do business here on trying to find things on the fly here. This is never good. Okay. What I wanted to say is that the lowest cost gas in the nation right now is $8 an MCF. Down in the lower 48, where costs are much less than Alaska's. So this is the challenge that I have with this provision. It does not take into account what is necessary in the market. And it doesn't take into account what would be necessary in the market going forward. All it does is say, we're going to tax you as much as possible, and you can only charge $5 an MCF to Alaskans. So we're gonna say we're taking care of Alaskans. But whether that actually leads to long-term success for gas continuing to come to Alaskans remains to be seen, because the market needs to be able to adjust. This is the reason why we are out of gas in Cook Inlet right now. Let me say that again. It is the reason. Government regulated, the RCA that says, that's the Regulatory Commission of Alaska. They're tasked by the legislature to make sure that citizens, that Alaskans don't get gouged by oil and gas companies, by utilities. They set the price, the maximum amount that we can be charged. And we say, thank you very much. You're keeping our costs down. Low cost of gas. Yeah. And who can complain? I like low gas, just like the next guy. But what it does, when you don't allow the market to charge what is necessary, not what everybody wants to pay, but what is necessary, you see what has happened in Cook Inlet, and producers of gas, explorers for gas, leave. They go and do business elsewhere. And it's not because gas is expensive to find, because it is. It always has been in Cook Inlet, and it always will be in Cook Inlet. Yes, it's expensive. It's that I can't return my investment. I can't spend money to go find gas and then be sure that I'm going to get my money back because the RCA, the Regulatory Commission of Alaska, is going to arbitrarily set what I can charge for the gas. And I can't guarantee that I'm going to be able to recoup my money after going through this endeavor. The market needs to be able to reflect that if you want gas to continue, then the market price that you pay needs to reflect that that needs to happen, that there's an additional cost to it. The gas developer isn't a charity. It isn't a charity. It has a board of directors and or it's a private company and it needs to make money. Like, I mean, I guess a private company can have a board of directors too. What I'm saying is it has its own reasons why it's in existence, and it's not a charitable organization. It is there to make a profit. And if you're going to arbitrarily set something there to protect Alaskans, but it doesn't have anything to do with what the demand of the market is, then the negative consequences of that decision are also going to be realized by Alaskans. Now, I have no idea whether the gas line project can survive $5 gas after the commencement of LNG export facilities. I have no idea if $12 gas after pipeline completion and before LNG export facility, right? So before we're exporting, it's only $12. And after we're exporting, I have no idea whether that's going to, I don't think anybody does right now. We're just going to set an arbitrary number and say, this is what we want Alaskans to charge. And we're going to take care of Alaskans so they don't get screwed. Maybe that works now. Will it work in the future? I don't know. What is the negative consequence if it doesn't? Is there an incentive to stop producing gas? Stop having gas flow through the pipeline? I don't know. I'm using this opportunity to show you what happens when you put price controls in place by government that otherwise would be corrected by the market. The market is going to allow for price fluctuations in order to keep the commodity, keep the thing that you want to buy in place. We don't have enough gas coming out of Cook Inlet right now because there aren't enough people who can make money at it. That's on us because we want gas. Apparently, we want taxes more than we want gas. I can't heat my home off taxes. The government can, but I can't.
Very good. I'll just comment that the company itself, Glenfarne, has indicated that they would not be pushing any cost overruns onto the rates paid by Alaska Utilities. And the governor had quoted the $5 and $12. So we simply put it into the bill. Any other comments, Senator Wielechowski?
Just on the language in the statute as it's currently written about cost overruns, do you have any suggestions for us about how we might write that so that there's no dispute later on about what the initial estimated cost would be? Should we just put in $46.2 billion, which is what the cost estimate we're all working under?
Sure, Senator Wielechowski through the chair. So I'd have to think on that and consult with the team and get back to the committee on suggested language.
That would be helpful. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, moving on then to slide 17, I think.
All right, so slide 17. So this provision would make some changes to how oil and gas is valued. So currently we may require tax to be paid on oil or gas that's sold at no cost or below prevailing value. This bill would change that to a shall. We don't believe that this would have a material impact on state revenue. There are some limited situations where there's a de minimis amount of oil or gas that is sold at a de minimis value, and it's really not worth it for us to go after a company for that de minimis amount of tax revenue. Under this language, we would be required to make sure that we get the full value of oil and gas for any oil and gas sold. And then add some language around how oil and gas must be based on a fair market value for production tax purposes. This version of the bill allows us to publish some aggregated information related to prevailing value and valuation of oil and gas. There was a previous version of the bill that required us to publish some detailed information. So the language in this current version would be much easier for us to work through and administer.
Senator Wielechowski.
We heard from DNR about where the point of production would be, and I'm curious what your perspective is. You heard the testimony from Department of Revenue. Where will the wellhead or point of production be for the producers in this project?
Sure, Senator Wielechowski through the chair. So I was listening to that back and forth. That ends up being a fairly technical explanation. So I can respond in general terms from the perspective of an economist. If we would like, some more technical explanation, I'd be happy to get back to the committee with that. In general, for tax purposes, the point of production is at the lease boundary. In our modeling, we assume that the transfer of the gas into the AKLNG project would be at the inlet to the gas treatment plant, or in the case, or in the pipeline, in a phase 1 case. For Point Thompson gas, we assume that the point of production would be at the leased boundary, and then there would be a feeder pipeline from the Point Thompson field to the gas treatment plant, which would be located at Prudhoe Bay. And as a general comment, we will need to develop regulations around the AKLNG project generally, if this project goes forward. And so this is one of the points that we may put a finer point on through the regulatory process.
Follow-up, Senator Wielechowski.
Are we correct in assuming that this is an important issue that we should be trying to discuss, or is this something that you think the regulatory process should work out? And let me just tell you where my big concern is that the point of production is somehow occurring after the gas treatment plant, and that's going to be an enormously expensive project, and the state value would be diminished tremendously.
Sure, Senator Wielechowski through the chair. So I think generally allowing the department some flexibility with the regulations is helpful. That will allow us to adapt to any future unforeseen changes in the process. The question of where of the gas treatment plant, and if that is before or after the point of production, that's a good question. So our understanding of the current project is that the gas treatment plant would be wholly owned by the midstream developer, and the sale of gas would take place prior to that. In concept, you could have processing take place on the lease before the sale of gas. If that were the case, presumably there would be a higher upstream cost and a higher sales price, because the developer would then be, rather than buying unprocessed gas and paying for the processing, they would be buying processed gas and presumably paying a higher price for that.
Follow up.
I can certainly understand the desire to do this through the regulatory process. One concern I have is that we didn't define royalties in TAPS and where the cost for that. And we went through decades of litigation that probably cost the state tens of billions of dollars. Is that an accurate statement?
Senator Wielechowski, through the chair, not qualified to opine on the cost of that.
Follow up.
So I guess my preference would be to make this determination now, because I think it's better for us to make the decision, an informed decision, a rational decision, so that there is a clear understanding for all the parties, and so that we don't have to go through years of litigation and years of that can potentially cost the state hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars.
It's so frustrating to hear. You don't have gas coming from Cook Inlet or from North Slope, and you've got a project before you, and what you're that proposes to bring gas from the North Slope, and what you're really worried about is whether the state of Alaska is going to lose money in taxes in order to get that benefit. It is just a fundamental philosophical difference that I have with people like this. I would much rather, and I think it would be healthier for the state government if you get a little bit of tax revenue from this in order to ensure that the project moves forward. And then any economic activity that results from having a consistent supply of gas, then you benefit from taxes off of that as well. So instead of trying to get all of your eggs in one basket, like we've done with oil, you look for ways to have multiple income streams and diversify your taxes across your economy so that any one hiccup doesn't affect the issue, right? The revenue to the state. So look to your economic engine, which would be improved by having lower cost gas, as low as we can get it, and consistent supplies. And then that helps you pay for your government. But that is not a conversation that is entering into the picture here. It is just myopically fixed on this particular project and what can be gained. Lynn asks me a personal question. She says, do I think these guys really plan to let the gas line move forward, given the Democratic platform? And for those that aren't aware, the Democrat Party platform is seeking to end oil and gas development in the state of Alaska. So you've got a Democrat senator sitting here asking questions about what he thinks is the right taxation structure, and his own political party's goal is to end this type of activity. So my personal opinion is that Senator Wielechowski recognizes that he probably is going to get some pushback if he takes the blame, if he is seen as responsible for killing the project. So finding a different way to place the blame on this not happening would be preferable to me taking credit in leading the charge. Okay. Be way easy if I had the courage to say, we don't need a gas line. We don't need oil development. I'm on board with my political party, and try to stop it that way. It would take courage to do that. So at a bare minimum, if the ulterior motive here is to follow along with the political party, then I can't be the one that receives the blame for doing it, because I can't get elected just off of Democrat votes. I've got to have a percentage of the undeclareds and the moderates or the nonpartisans within the voting block. Okay. They might be pissed off at me because they're not a party member. So I can't be the one that's responsible, but I can certainly set the conditions where I'll be able to blame somebody else. Like, hey, the state's maximum value for this is the tax, and this is what we're doing. This is my responsibility. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. Don't blame me. It's the corporation who chooses not to play ball here. They're the ones that want large profits and don't want to produce a pipeline unless there's massive unfair profits. I mean, you see, it's finding a way to allow somebody else to take the blame for why the project doesn't go forward. It's not bending over backwards, and it's not putting things in a simplistic way that says this project has value in multiple ways with state revenue and also what it does to the economy. And we can get more taxes. We can get at the same goal that I have, which is more revenue to the state through the byproduct of having gas. So let's get this pipeline going, and then we'll have this byproduct. So do I think they really, I think that they would like to see that Wielkowski and the Democrats would like to see the pipeline not happen, but they don't want the blame for it. And I also think this is the politics piece of it that has nothing to do with the pipeline. I think the governor is in a position to veto things out of this legislative session that the Democrats don't have the votes in the legislature to override the governor's veto, or they don't want to take the risk that they're not going to. And so they cannot be seen, and they don't want to have the blame for the pipeline not going forward in this regard, because they don't want the governor to veto things that are happening in the legislative session, especially here at the end. So do I think that they're going to let the gas line move forward? I think they want I think they want history to show that they're the ones that allowed it to move forward, with presenting some sort of maximum I don't know what the right word is here, but presenting a hurdle that the company may not be able to overcome, but it's going to be their choice, not the legislature's choice. So I don't know whether that is a good enough answer to that. I get the sense that, see, when Dunleavy had the press conference last week, I sensed, and maybe I'm wrong in this regard, but I sensed that there was a kind of a shift or a changing of this committee in particular, this committee's narrative, their tone, their energy, what they're making a big deal out of, how they're making a big deal. I've sensed a change in that. There's a shift is what I would say. So they're working towards getting a bill out that is going to meet the governor's, that they can say meets the governor's needs. They don't care whether it meets the governor's needs. They just want to be able to say, we did our due diligence. We have our responsibility. We're the legislature. We gave the governor what is fair. And the governor said, no, he vetoed it. Glenn Farn said, no. Well, this is what the legislature is about. We did we did what we're supposed to do and get maximum benefit for the state of Alaska. Can't fault us for it. Lynn, you're giving me a quote here. What is this from? Pausing all pending export permits this is from the Democrat Party platform is what you're showing here. Pausing all pending export permits for liquefied natural gas until updated criteria that consider the impact of climate change have been adopted. Yeah. I mean, clearly the zealots in this global warming religion, clearly those zealots don't want to see this pipeline move forward. I don't know whether Wielkowski is one of those zealots. My sense is, and the people I've talked to says he's not one of those zealots, but he wants to get elected. He wants to get reelected. So he needs the support of people that are in that party. So he's at least got to walk some sort of a fine line there of saying he did his due diligence and he did what was required. And he gave it his best attempt to try to make it not happen. But you got to understand the governor's going to need, I don't know what the argument would be. I'm not a Democrat, but yeah, the end of that statement that Lynn provides is from the Democrat perspective is supporting an orderly transition away from fossil fuels. And this, I don't know. This is what I've been saying all along, right? That lower cost gas from a pipeline makes it harder for wind and solar to be the primary energy source because it isn't as competitive when you have lower cost energy available from gas or from something else. So you've got to demonize that low cost energy and increase the cost as much as possible in order for your preferred method, your religiously preferred method, to be what is feasible, financially feasible. We need to go this direction with wind and solar because it's the least costly method, because we've manufactured high cost everywhere else, either through government regulation, the RCA's regulations, or through a tax regime that causes things to be so expensive, right? If the ultimate goal, it just makes sense to me that there are people at play here that don't want the pipeline to go forward because they've got ulterior motives. They're playing the longer game. Trump's going to be out of office in a couple of years, and we'll have our Democrat in, and we'll go right back to this. I mean, I'm looking at social media and I see all the ads coming across that are like, energy transition may have paused, but it's not gone away, and we need to do this. And like that political drive is still there. It's just bubbling underneath the surface. And as soon as Trump and Republicans aren't in control anymore, it's Katie bar the doors. We're headed that direction because we got to save the planet. I mean, this religion is not gone away. And Lynn, this is the thing is, if you put a pipeline in place and you're that zealot, you can't undo the pipeline. It's there and it's going to be there for 50 years until gas runs out, right? It's permanent. Whereas if you scuttle the project and you go to a importation process, well, then you can always shut the importation off. That's just on a contractual basis. We don't need the ships to bring LNG in anymore. We'll just turn it off. Not necessary. We've got our wind and our solar, and we don't need that anymore. So it's much easier. It's a much easier strategy to take to say, let's go with that. And the importation of the gas, the LNG, is likely to be, well, at least you have less control over the price. So it's likely to be more expensive than the upside of natural gas. But by the upside, I mean a natural gas pipeline exported to the rest of the world means lower cost gas for us. Okay. That's the upside. There's no upside cost-wise to imported LNG. It's going to be subject to the market demand, the spot price of gas, and it has nowhere to go but up, right? So we're always going to be paying maximum amount for imported LNG. The only hope we have is to be able to export our gas and reduce the cost for Alaskans through the pipeline's exportation. That's the only path that we have lower cost gas for us. So if you don't want oil and gas, then go with the strategy that says we pay highest cost for gas, because that makes it more cost effective to go with wind and solar. I firmly believe that there are people in the legislature and people in government in general and who are trying to influence this whole process, that is part of the goal, is to make sure that the pipeline doesn't happen so that we can continue this process in the future. I honestly believe that's part of it. This is a misnomer, Craig. Misnomer. This is incorrect. It's incorrect thinking. Your Senate president isn't in a position where he can reel in the committee. The damage was done when Senator Stevens, Senator Giesel, Senator Bjorkman, Senator Merrick agreed to put Democrats, and they joined a Democrat majority, meaning there are fewer Republicans in the majority than there are Democrats. So if you hold a impromptu poll, you decide behind closed doors within the majority in the Senate the Democrats have the majority of the votes. Okay, so the direction that you're going is based on the majority of the caucus, not the guy who's sitting in the Senate president seat. He gets overridden. He wants to do something on the floor. The majority of the floor can say, this is what we're going to do. Majority of the caucus can say that before they even get to the floor. Might be harder on the floor because Senator Stevens might get some minority votes to swing his way on a particular issue. So the Democrats might not be able to get their way on the floor. But in caucus, they certainly can. They control the committees. The Senate president doesn't control whether Senator Giesel or any of the Democrats as chairs of committees can do things or not do things. He doesn't control that. The damage was done when those quasi-quote Republicans empowered the Democrats to be in these liberals. I don't care what label you put on them. These people who want more taxes and don't care about oil and gas, when they got put in the chairs of the committees, that's when the damage was done. It can't be fixed by the Senate president. It's not how it works, especially in this environment that they have, the makeup of their organization. The damage was done when those Republicans joined with the Democrats. That's why you just have to peel the onion back and look at what was the motivation for that happening. Okay. What's the motivation? The Republicans were never going to pass a defined benefits bill. So your pro-union Republicans joined with the Democrats to get that defined benefits bill passed. That is the goal. That's always been the goal. It's why it was so important to do it that way. I think I just deleted a message here. I'm sorry. That was probably from Rick or Miguel. Yeah, I didn't mean to. It's not here anymore. Sorry about that. Well, yeah, I'm not going to get into that, Miguel. You were there. I was there. We'll see whether the Republicans actually do something about it. I'm not holding my breath. Yeah, that's. I still can't believe what has happened. So I don't know whether people are going to be held accountable. Ultimately, the accountability is at the ballot box. So I'll tell you by June 1st whether people are going to be held accountable by party or by voters. Okay. If you've got candidates running against Senator Stevens not coming back. If you got candidates supported by the party running against all of your Republicans in the Senate, and I think Giesel's the only one that's running right now. I might be mistaken on that, but I think she's the only Republican that's up. Anyway, if you've got a candidate that's being supported by the party running against her, then that'll tell me that they're trying to hold her accountable. Because that's how you do it. You just remove her from office. You can publish a sternly worded letter, and you can set it in your party rules where money can't be spent against that candidate. And none of that really matters if they can find money elsewhere. If people don't believe what the party says about them, then you can find, it doesn't matter. What really matters is if you've got a viable candidate that is going to defeat them in the election, and that's who you're going to back. Okay. That's what matters going forward. That's how you actually change what's going on. Goes with Murkowski, goes with anybody else that you look at that you want to see change happen or that you think that have done the wrong thing here. that are standing in the way of a pipeline or want to push forward a defined benefits bill, the way is you replace them in the election, whether they got a D or an R behind their name, because it doesn't really matter. So how does the party respond? We're going to find out whether all of this effort that we went through in our convention is just smoke and mirrors to get their way and be more like Democrats, or whether they actually want to get Republican things done. We're going to see. Okay. Let me see here. Okay. So this meeting continues on. I'm going to call it a night here on this. This meeting continues on and postpones. They didn't get through everything. So they're going to come back tomorrow. They're going to be starting two a day Senate resource meetings to get through this, because they're feeling the crunch. Want to get done. Want to hand a bill to the governor, right? They want to be seen to be team players and that they're moving forward with this. But you and I look at this and we know this is not something that's going to help the project move forward. Okay. The sooner they can get it out of resources, the sooner Senate Finance can do something different. And then we'll see what happens when it gets to the floor. So again, we talked about conference committees at the beginning. You've got a House bill that looks a lot different than this Senate bill. So unless the Senate bill works its way through the House and they do all their modifications to the Senate bill and it becomes the vehicle, these two bills, when they pass, they may have to come to a conference committee and try to iron out the differences. We'll see. I suspect it's going to go into a special session. I don't think they're going to get it done in the time. Now, also remember that it isn't just the rest of this session, day 120. The legislature can authorize itself to go forward another 10 days if it didn't get done with its work. So we got 10 days left. We actually have 20 days left. Can they get it done in that? I don't know. We'll see. I mean, if the Senate bill has got to get all the way through the House, 20 days is going to be rough. Like, I don't know whether that's possible. Anyway, I think that they probably go into a special session. It would be my guess. That would just be my guess. When the special session would happen, I mean, is the legislature incentivized to call themselves back into session? That would be really telling. If they don't get it done by day 120 and they don't call themselves in for an extra 10 days, then obviously they don't want the bill to go forward. Just at the governor, we don't care. Okay, well then that means something with all of the other bills you just passed. The governor's probably going to veto every single one of them. Okay, so we can't do that. We'll call ourselves in for the 10 days and we'll keep working on it. Ultimately, I got to pass something to the governor if I don't want my things being vetoed. That's ultimately where they're going to be at, whatever time frame. Do they call themselves back into a special session immediately to finish this? Could be, but they're incentivized to not do it. Although doing it sooner rather than later is preferable because you've got the election coming up. But I mean, the governor's going to call him back. He wants the bill. When he calls him back is going like, when would the governor want to call him back? Oh, I don't know. Maybe July, August, right when there's an election going. How cool would it be for these legislators to be in session while there's a primary election going on? Like, yeah. Let the voters decide without having you around. They'll figure out whether they want you or not. That's how you get a pipeline bill passed. Enough people are like, yeah, you better pass my pipeline bill or I'm not going to vote for you in the election. I don't know how many of these candidates are actually going to have more than 4 people running against them. They're probably all, maybe run unopposed or maybe having one opponent, and then they are going to go through. So maybe the primary election is not a very big deal for most of these state legislators. But anyway, I would expect that it's sooner rather than later. This bill needs to be passed. So the governor's not going to delay too long in calling a special session. It would, be immediately or within 30 days, maybe give everybody a break, let them cool off and get some rest. Because you know that all those legislators are stressed out. They're lacking sleep and overwhelmed. Guarantee it. Especially the ones who are putting in effort and trying to get things done. Okay. So it would probably be in everybody's best interest to take a break and go home, recharge the batteries for a little bit, and then come back to a conversation about pipeline tax, because nobody's really wanting to have that conversation at the end of the session, and temperatures are up and emotions are up. And yeah. Okay. So I'm guessing that you've got a couple weeks to 4 weeks or so before the governor would call them back in anyway. So it would be best for everybody if they would just get off their duff and get these bills passed and get them over to the governor in some form. I mean, if he vetoes it, if it comes to them and he has the conversation with Glenfarn, and Glenfarn says, yeah, sorry, this doesn't work for us, then he's got no choice but to veto it and then come back in a special session and start over. Present the same bill or another bill, or I don't know. He's got options, but that would be, in my opinion, if they don't pass the bill, or if they pass one that he vetoes, that's what's going to have to happen. Burned out. What does Lynn say? Burned out and on edge. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, that was my statement in committee. Nothing good happens after 9 p.m. Nothing good ever does. Like, don't make family decisions. Don't make important decisions after 9 p.m. Assuming you've been up all day. If you work night shift, that's okay. I worked swings in the Air Force when I was doing aircraft maintenance, and that I don't know, work 2 p.m. to midnight or whenever it was. 10, 12 hours days. That would be how I would have to make a decision by after 9 p.m. Anyway. All right. And I don't know what Glenfarn's timeline is. Glenfarn's timeline. I don't know what they wanted to move in April. Yeah. They've got to say something to show people and to show the contractors and all of the people they're trying to pull the project together. They got to say something for their time frame, but it is what it is. It's going to be what it is. And I don't think they're up against an arbitrary deadline that says they got to get it done by a certain, I mean, the longer it goes without some sort of solution, the more likely it is that the project doesn't go forward. But whether it's April or whether it's May, I don't think it matters. Well, obviously it doesn't matter because it's May now. Whether it's May or whether it's June, I don't think it matters. Oh, don't lose hope, Rick. Don't lose hope. You still got a private company out there that's putting their money out. You just got a lot of people and a lot of emotion in the state and a lot of political interest that is louder than the company is. The company's just doing its due diligence and quietly trying to make things happen. So don't lose hope. And yeah, I hope we're all wrong. Hope you're wrong if you think it's not going to happen. Anyway. All right, folks, have a great night. We will see you tomorrow night. Tuesday night, we'll see what happens within the legislature. We'll check and see what bills have passed. If there's anything that really matters, we'll find out what happens with House Finance. Should have the House version of the bill. I wonder what they're going to do with it. Conference committee should meet tomorrow, I would guess. Hopefully we'll know whether they've come up with any solutions or not. So we'll brief you on what we think is important. And if you've got any questions or want to have an update on something on a particular bill, drop me an email, send it to producer@oversightlive.com, and I'll try to incorporate it in the show tomorrow or during this week while we're down at the heading to the finish line. So, all right. Have a good night, folks. We'll see you later.